The crowd murmured as the ball swung again, crashing into the east wing where the old arcade had once buzzed with laughter. Metal screamed. Bricks collapsed inward. A memory flickered in Hannah's mind. Standing there as a girl, clutching a few quarters, the smell of buttered popcorn drifting from the movie theater nearby. The nostalgia broke when a foreman shouted. His voice carried above the clatter of machinery. "Stop! Everyone stop!" Engines cut off. The wrecking ball hung suspended. Workers began gesturing, pointing toward the rubble. The crowd pressed against the fence, murmurs sharpening into questions. Hannah moved closer, instincts prickling. Something was wrong. A worker scrambled over to the foreman, pale beneath his hard hat. "We hit something," he said loudly enough for those nearest to hear. "It's not just concrete." The foreman cursed, waving his arms to clear the site. But it was too late. Word spread like fire. Hannah heard fragments of conversation. What did they find? Is it a body? The abandoned mall had always been synonymous with the missing seven. Any disturbance of its walls was bound to raise suspicions. Hannah pulled her badge from her jacket pocket and ducked under the caution tape. "Detective Mercer," she said firmly to the foreman. "Show me." The man hesitated, then nodded grimly. He led her toward the rubble pile, where dust still drifted in lazy clouds. A jagged gap yawned in the exposed foundation. Sunlight streamed in, illuminating something pale wedged between broken concrete slabs. At first, Hannah thought it was a mannequin, a trick of the light, maybe a leftover display from a long-closed store. But as she crouched closer, her stomach clenched. It wasn't plastic. It was bone. Long bones, tangled and partial, protruding from the debris. Hannah straightened, her pulse hammering. "Shut it down. Nobody touches anything until forensics arrives." By sunset, the site was cordoned off with police tape. Squad cars lined the perimeter, reporters gathered like vultures, cameras flashing against the dying light. The town buzzed with one question. Had the missing children finally been found? Hannah stood with her captain, Frank Delgado, watching the forensic team work under portable lights. "It's skeletal," Frank murmured. "Could have been here decades." "Then it could be them," Hannah said quietly. Frank rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Careful. Don't get ahead of yourself," but Hannah already knew the truth. Deep down, everyone did. That night, as the town's local news station ran the headline, "Human remains found at Ashford Mall demolition." Old wounds split open. Families of the missing seven received calls from the department. Some cried, some refused to answer. And Hannah Mercer lay awake long after midnight, staring at the ceiling, remembering her own teenage years in Ashford. And the way the mall had once drawn kids in like a magnet. The past had been buried in concrete. Now it was clawing its way out. The news spread like smoke through dry timber. By dawn, Ashford was wide awake. Televisions glowing in living rooms, radios buzzing in kitchen corners. Human remains at the mall. For some, it was just another strange headline in a small town with a long memory. But for seven families, the words cut like a reopened wound. Detective Hannah Mercer didn't need to wait for her phone to ring. She knew who would call. She brewed a pot of coffee, poured it into a travel mug, and sat at her kitchen table, the phone resting face up. The first call came at 6:15 a.m. "Detective Mercer?" a thin voice asked. "Yes." "This is Rosa Ortiz." Hannah closed her eyes. Rosa, Jessica's mother. Jessica Ortiz had been 13 when she vanished in 1999, Rosa's only child. Hannah could still remember seeing Rosa at the candlelight vigils, clutching Jessica's school photo to her chest. "They said on the news." Rosa's breath shuddered through the receiver. "Is it her?" "I can't say yet," Hannah replied carefully. "The remains are still being examined. It could take days for confirmation, but it was the mall." Rosa's voice cracked, rising. "She's been there all along." Hannah gripped the phone tightly. "Rosa, I promise you, As soon as we know anything, you'll hear it from me first." A silence stretched, heavy with years of grief. Finally, Rosa whispered, "Don't let them bury her again." Then the line clicked dead. By mid-morning, the police station felt like a pressure cooker. Phones rang constantly. Reporters camped outside, their lenses pointed at the entrance. Inside, Captain Delgado assembled a task force. "This isn't just a cold case anymore," he told them, voice gravelly. "We treat it like fresh. Mercer, you're led." Hannah nodded, though a tremor passed through her chest. She was only 12 years old when the disappearances happened, just a year younger than the victims. She'd grown up with their faces staring from milk cartons and missing posters. Now she was the one charged with finding their truth. "First priority is the families," Delgado continued. "We'll be assigning liaisons, making sure they get updates before the media does. Next, we secure the site. Forensics is already on bone recovery. Preliminary analysis suggests more than one set of remains." A murmur rippled through the room. Multiple skeletons. Hannah's pen tapped against her notebook. If all 7 were buried under the mall, then 22 years of speculation could finally be laid to rest. But if only some of them were found, what then? That afternoon, Hannah drove to the Ortiz home on the west side of town. Rosa still lived there, a small white house with peeling paint and wine chimes that rattled in the autumn breeze. Rosa answered the door before Hannah could knock. She looked older than Hannah remembered, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes dark hollows. "Detective," she said simply, stepping aside. The living room was crowded with photographs. Jessica at every age, from a chubby-cheeked toddler to a middle schooler with braces and hopeful eyes. The largest photo sat above the mantel, Jessica in her cheerleading uniform, frozen in a smile that had haunted Ashford for 2 decades. "I knew they'd find her there," Rosa said, gesturing for Hannah to sit. "I knew. I told them back then. I said check the basement, the service tunnels." But they stopped listening. Hannah chose her words with care. The site was searched extensively in 1999. Dogs, cadaver teams, and nothing, Rosa cut in sharply. "Because someone wanted it hidden." Hannah studied her. Rosa's grief had calcified into suspicion long ago. Many parents had their theories: cults, trafficking rings, drifters. Rosa's conviction was always the same, that the children had been buried under the mall from the start, shielded by incompetence or corruption. "Mrs. Ortiz," Hannah said gently, "forensics will confirm soon. But if these are Jessica's remains, we'll finally have a chance to understand what happened." Rosa's gaze flicked to the photos on the wall. "Understand," she whispered. "I don't care about understanding. I just want her home." Later, Hannah drove across town to meet the Brooks family. Aaron Brooks had been 12, the youngest boy of 4 brothers. His parents had since divorced. His father moved away, but his mother still lived in Ashford. Karen Brooks greeted Hannah with a cool, exhausted expression. "I figured you'd show up," she said, ushering the detective into a kitchen that smelled faintly of bleach. Unlike Rosa's shrine of photos, Karen kept almost nothing of Aaron visible. Just a single frame on a shelf. Aaron in his Little League uniform, cap crooked, glove in hand. "You think it's him?" Karen asked, pouring coffee with steady hands. "I don't know yet," Hannah admitted. Karen snorted softly. "They never know." 22 years, and all I ever heard was, "We don't know." Hannah took a sip of coffee, bitter on her tongue. "Mrs. Brooks, whatever we find, I promise we won't let it fade this time." Karen studied her for a long moment. "You were a kid yourself when it happened, weren't you?" 12, Hannah said quietly. Karen's face softened slightly. "Then you know. You know what it was like to grow up here, with 7 ghosts walking the halls at school." Hannah nodded. She remembered the empty desks, the teachers' tight voices, the whispers in the cafeteria. Ashford had never healed. By evening, Hannah had visited 3 more families. Each one bore grief differently. Lydia Moore's parents had moved on the year after she vanished, starting fresh in another town. Kim Young's mother had become an activist for missing children, speaking at conferences, traveling the country with a suitcase full of photos. Maya Ellis's father had withdrawn into himself, refusing to speak more than a few words. But they all shared one thing: a flicker of hope mixed with dread. Hope that their children had finally been found. Dread of what that truth might mean. That night, Hannah returned to the station. Forensics had delivered their preliminary report. Remains of at least 3 individuals had been recovered so far. Ages consistent with adolescence. Time of death estimated more than 20 years ago. The air in the briefing room was heavy. Delgado looked around at his team. 3 down, 4 unaccounted for. This isn't over. Hannah stared at the photos pinned to the corkboard. 7 smiling children, forever young. Her pen hovered over her notes. If 3 were buried, who had hidden the others? And why did the mall still feel like it was keeping secrets? The next morning dawned gray and cool, a thin mist clinging to the cracked pavement around Ashford Mall. Police cruisers lined the perimeter, their lights off but presence heavy, while yellow tape fluttered like weak warning banners against the rusting fences. Detective Hannah Mercer parked near the East Wing, the place where the wrecking ball had struck, and stepped out into the quiet. Even after all the commotion of the past 48 hours, the mall loomed in eerie stillness, a monolith of decay holding its breath. The forensic tents had gone up overnight. White canvas domes, bright halogen lights inside, and figures in Tyvek suits moving slowly among the rubble. Hannah signed her name on the log and ducked under the tape. "Morning, Detective." A forensic tech looked up from the debris pile, his mask speckled with dust. His name was Patel, a meticulous man with tired eyes. "What's the update?" Hannah asked. Patel gestured toward the gap in the foundation. "We've recovered more bone fragments. Femur, vertebrae, jaw. We're cataloging. At least 4 sets now, possibly 5. Hannah's stomach tightened. Any signs of trauma?" Patel hesitated. "Too early to tell. Some bones show stress fractures, but could be from the collapse when the mall deteriorated. We'll need lab work." She crouched near the rubble, peering into the dark cavity below. The hole gaped like a throat, swallowing light. She imagined 7 kids, laughing, daring each other, stepping into the darkness 2 decades ago, and never coming back. "What about personal effects?" she asked. Patel handed her a small evidence bag. Inside was a tarnished silver bracelet, bent slightly out of shape. A name was etched on the underside: Kim. Hannah's breath caught. "Kim Ung," she whispered. Patel nodded grimly. "We'll confirm with the family." Hannah sealed the bag and stood. The bracelet felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried not just metal but memory. Proof that the kids had indeed been here, their lives cut off and buried under tons of concrete. Reporters clustered outside the fence when Hannah exited the site. Cameras swung toward her, microphones thrust forward. "Detective Mercer, how many bodies have been found? Are the families being notified? Is this confirmation the 7 were murdered here?" Hannah raised a hand, keeping her voice calm. "The investigation is ongoing. We'll release confirmed information through official channels. Please respect the family's privacy." Flashes popped like gunfire. Questions rained down, sharp and insistent. Hannah kept walking, jaw tight, until she reached her car. Inside, the silence was deafening. She pressed her palms against the steering wheel, forcing her breath steady. She had dealt with the media before, but this case wasn't just professional. It was personal. She had grown up with the missing kids' faces on every telephone pole. Their names had been whispered at sleepovers, invoked in dares. "Don't go near the mall, or you'll end up like them." Now the whispers had become bones. That evening, Hannah sat at her desk in the station, files spread across the surface like a paper graveyard. She had pulled the original 1999 case reports, dozens of binders filled with interviews, maps, and photographs. The initial search had been massive. 200 volunteers, state troopers, dogs, helicopters. The mall had been combed over for weeks. Yet somehow, the kids had been missed, lying beneath the very floors officers had walked. She flipped through crime scene photos, the row of abandoned bicycles outside the east entrance, the pink sneaker lying on the dusty tile, Jessica's notebook found in a stairwell, doodles of hearts and song lyrics filling the margins. Her pen scribbled in the margins. Where did the search fail? Who had access? Who could hide bodies here without being seen? A knock at the door pulled her from the pages. Captain Delgado leaned against the frame, his tie loosened. "You've been at it all day," he said. "I can't let it go," Hannah admitted. "They were right under our feet." Delgado stepped inside, lowering his voice. "We're reopening every angle. And Hannah, this is going to get ugly. A case this cold doesn't thaw without burning fingers. People will want someone to blame. Some of them might point at law enforcement. Even your predecessors," Hannah met his gaze. "If mistakes were made, we face them." That's the only way. Delgado nodded slowly. "I just want you ready." That night, Hannah drove home past the mall. The floodlights still burned at the site, casting harsh angles across the sagging structure. For a moment, she pulled over and sat with the engine idling. Her mind wandered back to April 1999. She had been 12, sprawled on her bed doing homework when the phone rang. Her best friend had whispered, "Did you hear? 7 kids are gone. They went to the mall." The next day at school, teachers spoke in hushed tones. Parents showed up early. And in the cafeteria, 7 chairs sat empty. Hannah remembered staring at them, trying to imagine the kids. Jessica with her ponytail, Aaron with his crooked grin, Kim with her loud laugh, and failing. Now, decades later, their absence still pressed on the town like a bruise that never faded. Hannah rolled down her window. The mall loomed against the night, a black silhouette. In the distance, she thought she heard the faint metallic groan of beams shifting, echoing like voices. She shivered and drove on. The next morning brought another development. "Detective Mercer," Patel said over the phone, his voice taut. "We've found something new. You'll want to see this yourself." At the site, Hannah donned a mask and gloves before stepping into the forensic tent. Patel guided her to a tray laid out under bright light. On it lay a bundle of fabric, faded, stained, but recognizable. A child's backpack. The canvas was torn, the zipper rusted. Inside were scraps of paper, a math worksheet with neat handwriting, a folded photograph of a dog, a library card. The name scrawled on the inside tag, Evan Daniels. Hannah's throat tightened. She could almost see him, a boy lugging that backpack to school, pencil tucked behind his ear. She set the evidence down carefully, as if afraid to hurt it. Patel spoke softly. "Detective, this isn't just a burial site. It looks deliberate, almost ritualistic." "What do you mean?" "The bodies weren't just dumped. They were arranged, layered, personal belongings mixed in. Someone wanted them here, hidden, but together." Hannah stared at the backpack. Together. The word rattled in her chest. 7 children had vanished into silence, and now their voices were clawing back through rubble. That night, Hannah called Rosa Ortiz. "Mrs. Ortiz," she said gently, "we've recovered more items. Jewelry, clothing. Some belonged to Jessica's friends." Rosa's voice trembled. "And Jessica?" "Not yet," Hannah admitted. A long pause followed. Then Rosa said, "Maybe she's still alive." Hannah closed her eyes. She wished she could feed that hope, but the bones in the rubble told a different story. "Whatever the truth is," Hannah whispered, "we'll find it." Outside her window, the wind rattled the trees, sounding like distant footsteps echoing through the hollow mall. The town of Ashford hadn't seen this much attention in decades. By the end of the week, satellite news vans crowded the roads leading to the mall. Reporters stood in front of the chain-link fences, delivering live updates as if Ashford were suddenly the epicenter of the nation's grief. For locals, the spectacle felt like an invasion. Some residents avoided the area altogether, unwilling to relive the old wound. Others lingered near the barricades, watching, as if needing to prove to themselves that the tragedy had been real all along. Detective Hannah Mercer drove slowly past the crowds that Friday morning. Her badge got her through the checkpoint, but the weight of eyes followed her car. Ashford had become a stage, and she was one of the reluctant actors. Inside the tent, Patel met her with grim efficiency. "We're up to 5 individuals now," he said. "DNA tests are pending, but dental records are already giving us matches. Kim Ung, Evan Daniels, Aaron Brooks." No doubt Hannah inhaled sharply. The names sounded heavier when spoken aloud, like pulling stones from a riverbed. "And the others?" she asked. "Still cataloging," Patel replied. 2 incomplete sets. One appears to be female, around 11. Could be Lydia Moore, leaving Jessica and Maya unaccounted for, Hannah murmured. Patel nodded. "If they're here, we haven't reached them yet." Hannah pressed her hands to her knees, grounding herself. "Keep me updated the moment you know." That afternoon, she met with the families at the community center, a beige building that smelled faintly of floor polish and coffee. Chairs had been arranged in a circle. 7 families, 7 wounds reopened. Hannah stood at the front, her notes trembling slightly in her hand. "We've confirmed 3 identities through dental records," she said softly. "Kimberly Ung, Evan Daniels, and Aaron Brooks." Gasps, sobs, and silence rippled through the room. Kim's mother covered her face, shoulders shaking. Aaron's brother stared hard at the floor, fists clenched. "We're still processing more remains," Hannah continued. "It's possible the others are there as well. Please understand, this is an ongoing investigation, and I promise to keep you informed every step of the way." A voice cut through the room. "Why now?" It was Martin Ellis, Maya's father, his face gray and hard. "Why did it take 22 years for someone to find them? Why didn't you police dig deep enough back then?" The question hung heavy. Hannah knew better than to answer defensively. She let the silence stretch, then said, "I don't know yet. But I intend to find out." Rosa Ortiz leaned forward, eyes burning. "Find out who failed us. And find out who put them there that night." Hannah stayed late at the station, combing through old records again. She studied maps of the mall's lower levels, maintenance tunnels, storage basements, forgotten utility corridors. The 1999 reports mentioned cadaver dogs alerting in the East Wing. Yet no bodies were found. Why? She flipped pages, scanning for overlooked details. Then she saw it, a notation in the margin of one report, scribbled by an officer long since retired. "East Wing floor poured 1997. New concrete, unexplained renovation." Hannah frowned. The mall had been failing in the late 90s. Why spend money on new concrete? Unless it wasn't maintenance at all. Unless it was a burial. She highlighted the note and leaned back. The image came to her unbidden. 7 children laughing, pushing one another toward the dark service entrance, unaware that someone had already prepared the floor above their graves. The next morning, Hannah visited the public library, where archives of the Ashford Gazette were kept in dust-coated binders. The librarian, a thin man with wire glasses, led her to the back. "Renovations in 97? Hannah asked, flipping through brittle pages. "Yeah, I remember," the librarian said. Mall claimed they were fixing a sewer issue, but it was odd. They poured fresh slab over half the East Wing. Closed the arcade for months. Hannah's eyes landed on a grainy photo in the paper. Construction crews wheeling cement mixers into the mall. The caption read, East Wing repairs underway. The date, June 1997, 2 years before the children vanished. Why reinforce a dying mall? Unless the purpose wasn't structural, but concealing. Her phone buzzed. Patel. Detective, we've got something else. You'd better get here. When Hannah arrived, Patel led her to the newest tray of evidence. At first, she didn't see what was unusual, just bones and dust. Then he pointed to a small object laid carefully to the side. A Polaroid photograph. It was warped, edges stuck with grime, but the image was still visible. A group of children standing in what looked like the mall's food court. 7 children. Their faces were blurred with time, but the outlines were unmistakable. Backpacks, sneakers, grins. One boy held up 2 fingers in a peace sign. Another girl leaned on a rail, her ponytail swinging. They were photographed here, Hannah whispered. Patel nodded. And look closer. He handed her a magnifying glass. In the background of the photo, half hidden in shadow, stood a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face obscured by blur, but his posture was predatory, watching, not posing. The kids didn't take this picture, Patel said. Hannah's skin prickled. Whoever had taken the Polaroid had been with them, close enough to capture their last carefree moment. She set the photo down carefully, her pulse thudding. The mall wasn't just a tomb. It had been a stage. Someone had watched. Someone had kept souvenirs. That evening, Hannah drove back to the mall, headlights sweeping across the weeds and graffiti. She parked outside the east entrance, the same place the children had chained their bikes. The chain was long gone, the doors rusted shut, but she could almost see them there, laughing, daring each other to go inside. She stood in the quiet, wind tugging at her coat. The mall loomed, black windows like blind eyes. For a moment, Hannah felt the weight of unseen eyes on her, as though the man in the photograph still lingered, watching from the shadows. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Delgado. "Mercer," he said, his voice low. "We've got a problem. Someone's been watching the site, multiple nights in a row. Same vehicle, parked just far enough away to stay out of sight." Hannah's hand tightened on her phone. "Who?" "Working on it. But whoever it is, they don't want to let go of this place." Hannah looked at the mall's dark facade. The silence pressed around her, heavy and knowing. The children hadn't just disappeared. They had been claimed. And maybe, just maybe, their captor had never left. The following Monday, Captain Delgado gathered the task force in the briefing room. A whiteboard at the front displayed the 7 faces of the missing children, and beneath them, photographs of the new evidence. Bracelet, backpack, bones, and the Polaroid. Delgado tapped the photo with his marker. "This changes everything. Someone was with them. Someone took this picture. We have to assume that person is our perpetrator." The room was silent, every officer staring at the blurry figure in the background. The man's features were indistinct, but his presence was undeniable. "We're reopening the 1999 witness lists," Delgado continued. "Every mall employee, every security guard, every contractor, anyone who had access to the East Wing before or during those disappearances. Mercer, your lead on cross-referencing those names with construction records from '97. Hannah nodded. She'd barely slept since the Polaroid surfaced. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw those children frozen in grainy light, carefree, seconds from vanishing. She started at City Hall, in the dusty basement archive where permits and contracts were kept. The clerk, a heavy-set man with a balding head, wheeled out a stack of folders labeled Ashford Mall, 1997 renovations. Hannah slipped on gloves and began flipping through. Most were standard permits, signed by engineers and overseen by city inspectors. But one contractor's name appeared repeatedly: Charles G. Whitman. He'd handled the concrete work for the East Wing slab. His signature was scrawled across multiple forms. Hannah jotted it down. The name rang no bells from the old police files. Whoever Whitman was, he hadn't been interviewed during the original investigation. She left the archive with a knot in her chest. Had the man who poured that concrete also buried the children beneath it? Back at the station, she searched databases. Whitman had owned a small construction company based out of a warehouse near the highway. The company dissolved in 2001, 2 years after the disappearances. Current address? None. No tax filings in over a decade. A ghost. Hannah leaned back, frustration simmering. Then she noticed a note in one file. Emergency contact. Brother, Harold Whitman. She picked up the phone. Harold Whitman lived in a weathered bungalow on the outskirts of Ashford. When Hannah knocked, the door opened slowly, revealing a wiry man in his 60s with watery eyes. Yes? He asked. Mr. Whitman? I'm Detective Mercer. I'd like to ask you about your brother Charles. The man flinched. What about him? Records show he handled concrete work at the mall in 1997. Do you know where he is now? Harold's gaze darted past her, scanning the street. I haven't seen Charlie in years. He left town. Oh, must have been 2002. Didn't leave a number. That's just how he was. Why did his company dissolve? Hannah pressed. Harold shifted uncomfortably. Money trouble. He drank too much. Got paranoid. Said people were after him. What kind of people? Harold hesitated, then whispered, Cops. He said they asked questions he didn't like. Hannah's pulse quickened. About the children? Harold's lips tightened. He never said. But he moved fast after that. Packed a truck and disappeared. Haven't heard from him since. Where would he go? Harold shook his head. Charlie had a cabin out near the reservoir. Old hunting place. But that's probably long abandoned. Hannah thanked him and left, though her skin prickled with unease. A man who poured fresh concrete just before the children vanished. A man who vanished himself once questions arose. That evening, she drove out toward the reservoir. The road narrowed into gravel, lined with cedar and pine. The air grew damp with the smell of water and moss. She found the cabin half hidden by trees, its roof sagging, windows boarded. Her flashlight beam swept across the porch, where beer cans lay rusted in the leaves. Charles Whitman, she called, though the forest swallowed her voice. The door creaked open under her a push. Inside, the cabin smelled of mildew and old smoke. Dust coated every surface, but there were signs of habitation. A mattress on the floor, a wood stove with charred logs, cans of food dated only 5 years old. Not abandoned. Not entirely. In the corner, she found a trunk. The lock was broken. Inside lay stacks of photographs curled with age. Her breath caught. They were Polaroids. Children in the mall. Some grinning, some unaware of the camera. Always from a distance, always with that sense of being watched. And in several, the same 7 faces appeared. Jessica, Kim, Evan, Aaron, Maya, Lydia, and Noah. The missing. Hannah's hand shook as she pulled one photo closer. Jessica stood near the carousel, her ponytail swinging, eyes turned toward someone unseen. On the edge of the frame, a large hand gripped the rail. She dropped the photo back into the trunk, her chest tightening. A floorboard creaked behind her. Hannah spun, flashlight cutting through dust. The doorway was empty, but the air felt charged. She backed toward the exit, every instinct screaming. Outside, the forest was silent. Too silent. She hurried to her car, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, yet the sensation of eyes lingered, heavy and unrelenting. She started the engine and sped back toward town. The photos burned into her mind. At the station, she laid the Polaroids across the table. Delgado leaned over them, jaw set. Jesus, he muttered. How many are there? Dozens, Hannah said. All inside the mall, all before they vanished. and all taken by someone who had unrestricted access. Delgado rubbed his forehead. If Whitman still has a pulse, we need to find him. Hannah nodded, though her stomach twisted. Whoever took those photos hadn't just killed. He had watched, collected, lingered, and judging from the cabin, he might still be watching. The photographs spread across the table looked like relics of another world, grainy, overexposed, yet heavy with menace. 7 children caught mid-laughter, mid-step, mid-life, always unaware of the lens fixed on them. Detective Hannah Mercer sat with her elbows braced on the table, eyes burning from lack of sleep. Each Polaroid was an indictment, but also a question. Who had carried a camera through the mall in those days? Who had the freedom to linger, unseen? Captain Delgado entered with 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of her and lowered himself into the chair opposite. State police are on board now, he said. They'll help process Whitman's property. But so far, he's a ghost. No bank activity, no driver's license renewals. If he's alive, he's living off the grid. Hannah rubbed her forehead. Or someone helped him disappear. Delgado sipped his coffee. The thing about ghosts, sometimes they leave footprints. We'll find his. That afternoon, Hannah returned to the forensic tent at the mall. Patel was crouched over a tray, tweezers in hand. Detective, he said, you need to see this. He lifted a small object, cleaned of dust. A brass key, tarnished, its teeth worn smooth. A faded tag dangled from a ring. Storage 12A. Where'd you find it? Hannah asked. Wedged in concrete rubble, Patel said. Looks like it had been dropped before the slab set. It got stuck in the seam. Hannah frowned. 12A. That matches a storage corridor in the old mall blueprint. Patel nodded. If that key still works, there might be another layer to this site we haven't accessed yet. The corridor was deep in the east wing, past the gutted food court. The air smelled of rust and mildew as Hannah and 2 officers pried open the corroded door. Their flashlights cut through dust. Rows of metal doors lined the hall, each marked with stenciled numbers. When they reached 12A, Hannah pulled the key from her pocket. It slid into the lock with a reluctant scrape and turned. The door creaked open. Inside was a narrow storage room, the walls lined with shelves of broken fixtures and old mall signage. But at the far end, under a sagging tarp, something bulky was stacked. Hannah pulled the tarp aside. Beneath it were boxes, cardboard, duct-taped, marked only with dates. 1998, 1999, 2000. Her pulse hammered as she cut the tape on the first box. Inside were clothes, children's clothes. A striped sweater, a pair of jeans, sneakers. The next box held notebooks, toys, hairbrushes, personal belongings. These are theirs, Hannah whispered. Their things. The third box chilled her most of all. It contained Polaroids, hundreds. Some were duplicates of the ones she'd found at the cabin, others were worse. Close-ups of frightened faces, blurred images of children running, shadows of hands reaching. Her flashlight flickered over one photo. Jessica Ortiz, her eyes wide, her smile gone. Hannah dropped the photo, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't just murder. This was obsession, ritual, documentation. Someone had kept trophies, curated a gallery of suffering beneath the very mall where the town shopped and gathered. Back at the station, the task force pored over the boxes. Each item was logged, photographed, bagged. The evidence room swelled with artifacts of lives cut short. Delgado stood at the head of the table, jaw tight. This was no random act. This was organized, pre-planned. Whoever did this wasn't just hiding bodies. They were curating memories, one officer muttered, like a museum. The word lingered, sickening. Hannah sat silently, her hands clasped tight. She thought of Rosa Ortiz, of Karen Brooks, of every parent who had begged for answers in 1999. The answers had been here all along, boxed and hidden in a concrete tomb. The discovery shook Ashford. News outlets ran the story non-stop. Children's belongings found in mall storage room. Crowds gathered at the police barricades, holding candles, photos, homemade signs demanding justice. At the community center, families were brought in privately to view select items for identification. Kim Ung's mother pressed her face to her daughter's sweater, sobbing into the faded fabric. Aaron Brooks's brother clenched his jaw as he recognized a baseball cap. Rosa Ortiz shook as she confirmed Jessica's notebook, her daughter's looping handwriting across the pages. One by one, the past clawed its way into the present. Each object a ghost returned. Hannah stayed in the corner, observing quietly, giving the family space. Yet their pain weighed on her like lead. She wondered if Whitman had ever stood in this same room years ago, laughing to himself as the families cried. Later that night, Hannah drove to the edge of town. She parked her car and sat with the engine off, staring at the dark horizon. She imagined the children's last moments, maybe lured with promises, maybe cornered in the corridors. She wondered if they had screamed, if anyone had heard. And she thought of Charles Whitman, somewhere out there, perhaps alive, perhaps watching the news even now. Did he see the faces of the parents? Did he hear the names of his victims spoken again? The thought made Hannah's chest tighten. If Whitman had escaped justice for 22 years, he wouldn't let himself be cornered easily now. The hunt had only begun. The following morning, Delgado summoned Hannah to his office. His expression was unreadable. "Mercer," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "We've got a new lead. Bank records just surfaced. Charles Whitman withdrew cash in 2007 from an ATM in Waco. Grainy security footage caught him. It's old, but it's him." Hannah's pulse spiked. "So he survived at least that long." Delgado nodded. "And if he had money then, he might have help now. We're pulling associates, relatives, anyone who might have sheltered him." Hannah opened the folder. The blurred image showed a man older, heavier, hair thinning, but the eyes, cold, watchful, matched the shadowy figure in the Polaroids. She stared at the photo, heart pounding. The man who had turned the Ashford Mall into a tomb was still out there, and somewhere he was watching. By the end of the week, Ashford was raw with tension. Every corner cafe, every gas station counter hummed with whispers. People pointed at the news vans parked along Main Street, at the barricades by the mall, and muttered the same words. 22 years. And nobody knew. Detective Hannah Mercer felt the weight of those whispers even in her own neighborhood. Her mailbox overflowed with flyers, some from advocacy groups, some angry petitions demanding accountability. Each one was a reminder that in a small town, tragedy was never abstract. It was personal. At the grocery store, she caught fragments of conversation. "They walked over those kids for weeks and missed them. I told you back then something was off. Bet the police covered it up." By the time she left, she had avoided 3 confrontations and plastered on 2 forced smiles. At the station, Captain Delgado convened another task force meeting. His voice was clipped, his eyes bloodshot. "We've confirmed the remains of Lydia Moore and Noah Franklin," he announced. "That leaves Jessica Ortiz and Maya Ellis still unaccounted for." The room was silent. 2 children still missing from the tomb. Delgado continued. "The DA is already circling. They want names, culpability. They'll be combing through our department's history." "Mercer, I want you prepared for blowback. You've become the face of this case." Hannah shifted uncomfortably. "It's not about me." "It's about the kids," Delgado's jaw tightened. "Tell that to the press. They don't care about nuance." Later that afternoon, Hannah drove to the Ortiz home. Rosa had called, her voice unsteady. "Please just come. I can't stop thinking." The Ortiz house hadn't changed much since Hannah was a child. The same sun-faded curtains, the same creaking porch swing. Rosa opened the door, her hands trembling. "Detective," she said, ushering her inside. The living room was dim, the air thick with incense. On the coffee table lay Jessica's notebook, open to a page of doodles and half-written lyrics. "I can't stop staring at this," Rosa whispered. "It feels like she was just here, yesterday." Like she'll walk through the door any moment. Hannah sat across from her. "We're still searching, Rosa." "We won't stop." Rosa's eyes glistened. "I need you to promise me. If Jessica's gone, if she's really gone, don't let her be forgotten. Don't let her be just another box in storage." The words lodged deep in Hannah's chest. She reached across the table and covered Rosa's hand. "I promise." That night, Hannah sat alone at her kitchen table, files spread out around her like a paper labyrinth. She studied Charles Whitman's old construction records again, tracing his movements through the late 90s. Each contract told a story. Mall renovations, warehouse foundations, road repairs. He had been everywhere, pouring concrete, sealing things beneath layers of stone. She circled the word reservoir in her notes. His cabin had been near water. His bank withdrawal in 2007 had been in Waco, also near a reservoir. A pattern tugged at her, half-formed. Concrete, water, hiding places. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Patel. "Detective, we've found something in the Polaroid stack," he said. His voice carried a sharp edge. "You'd better come in." At the lab, Patel laid out 3 photos under bright light. "This sequence," he said, pointing. "Look carefully." The first photo showed the food court, kids clustered around a table, grinning. The second, taken from the same angle, showed them again. But Jessica was missing. The third, moments later, showed Maya looking off frame, her face tense, as if startled. "She was taken between shots," Patel said. "Jessica disappears. Maya reacts. Whoever was behind the camera, they were orchestrating this." Hannah stared at the images, her pulse quickening. These weren't random snapshots. They were deliberate, staged. Patel added quietly, "The timestamps on the Polaroid film match late April 1999, days before the kids vanished." Hannah exhaled. He rehearsed it. He practiced their disappearance. The next morning, the town erupted. A local paper ran a headline in bold black letters. "Police walked over children's graves." The article featured angry quotes from parents, speculation about cover-ups, even accusations of deliberate negligence. By noon, protesters had gathered outside the station. Some held signs reading "Justice for 7" and "Ashford demands answers." Others shouted insults at officers entering and leaving. Inside, tension simmered. Younger officers whispered about resignations. Veterans kept their eyes down. Delgado slammed his office door. "We can't lose control of this," he barked to Hannah. "The FBI's sniffing around. If they take over, we'll be sidelined." Hannah forced calm into her voice. "Then we need results. We need Whitman Delgado's eyes burned. Then find him." That evening, Hannah returned to the reservoir cabin. This time she brought 2 officers and a warrant. They combed the place thoroughly, bagging every scrap of paper, every can, every trace. In the stove's ash pan, Hannah found charred fragments of photographs. More Polaroids, burned hastily, some corners still intact. One corner showed part of a child's face, an eye wide with fear. Another showed the hem of a pink skirt. Jessica's skirt. Hannah's breath caught. She sealed the evidence bag and stepped outside, the forest pressing silent around them. Somewhere out there, Whitman still carried the rest of the story, and he wasn't finished. The lake was still that morning, a sheet of gray glass broken only by the occasional ripple of wind. Hannah stood at the edge of the Ashford Reservoir, the chill biting through her jacket. Beside her, Patel zipped his coat and unfolded the search maps. "Cadaver dogs picked up a hit near the North Spillway," he said. We've got divers on standby. Hannah squinted across the water. The north spillway was a half-sunken stretch of concrete, long abandoned after the dam had been retrofitted in the early 2000s. If Charles Whitman had needed a place to discard something, or someone, water and concrete would have been his signature. "Run it," she said. By noon, divers in black wetsuits slipped beneath the surface. The team watched from the banks, radios crackling with static. Minutes stretched into an hour. The wind carried the faint hum of boat engines from the far side of the lake. Then a shout. "We've got something!" 2 divers surfaced, hauling up a heavy object draped in silt and weeds. They wrestled it onto the bank, and as the muck fell away, Hannah's heart sank. A rusted metal drum. Patel crouched, pulling on gloves. With a crowbar, he pried the lid free. The smell hit first, acrid, chemical, wrong. Inside was a slurry of degraded fabric and bone fragments. The officers nearby went silent. Patel spoke quietly. "This isn't from 20 years ago. The decomposition rate, this is more recent." "Maybe 5-6 years," Hannah's throat tightened, which means Whitman didn't stop. The drum was sealed, bagged, loaded into the van. But the unease lingered. The mall hadn't been his only stage. That evening, Hannah drove back into town. Ashford was on edge. The candlelight vigils outside the mall had turned into angry rallies. Shouts echoed down Main Street. "Find him! Bring him back!" At the station, Delgado briefed her in a low voice. "We've got reports of locals harassing former mall security guards. Someone threw a brick through the window of an old officer's house last night. They think everyone failed them." "They're not wrong," Hannah murmured. Delgado's eyes were hard. "We can't control grief, but we can control the investigation. Whitman's trail is warming. Waco was the last confirmed sighting, 2007. The question is, where'd he go after?" Hannah tapped the map pinned on the wall, Ashford, Waco, and smaller towns between. "He's tied to water. Reservoirs, rivers, places he knows from construction jobs. That's where we look." Delgado nodded. "We'll pull work records. Every site he ever poured concrete at. Start there." The next day, Hannah and Patel drove to Waco. They met with a retired officer who remembered the 2007 ATM withdrawal. "Yeah, I recall that," the man said, sipping coffee in his cluttered living room. "Guy looked spooked. Made the withdrawal and bolted before I could blink. We ran the plate on his truck. Stolen. Never saw him again." "Truck color?" Hannah asked. "Blue Ford. Old, dented. No plates on the back." Patel jotted notes. Hannah studied the officer's weary face. "Did he say anything?" "To the teller? To anyone?" The officer frowned, thinking. "He muttered something when he walked past me. Couldn't catch all of it. Just, 'They'll never find it.' Over and over, like a mantra." Hannah's skin prickled. "They'll never find it." What had he buried that remained hidden? That night, Hannah checked into a motel outside Waco. Sleep evaded her. She sat by the window, staring at the neon buzz of the vacancy sign. Files spread across the bed. Polaroids, blueprints, maps of reservoirs. Whitman's face from the grainy ATM photo. Her mind circled the same thought. If he'd killed again after the mall, where were those victims? How many more families waited without knowing? A knock startled her. She opened the door to find Patel holding 2 beers. "Figured you weren't sleeping," he said. They sat at the small table, the air heavy with exhaustion. "He's not just a killer," Patel said quietly. "He's a collector. Those Polaroids, the storage room, the boxes. He wanted to keep them, to relive it." Hannah nodded. "And someone like that doesn't just stop." They sat in silence, the hum of the motel sign outside like a pulse. 2 days later, the call came. A fisherman near the Brazos River had found another drum, snagged on a sandbar. This one was newer, less rust, fresher paint. Inside were the remains of a woman in her 20s. Dental records matched a missing person from 2015, a college student who had vanished after leaving a bar in Waco. Hannah stared at the report, stomach churning. Whitman hadn't just resurfaced in 2007, he'd stayed active. And he might still be hunting. Back in Ashford, the discovery ignited the town like gasoline. Protesters surrounded the station, their voices raw. At a town meeting, parents shouted at officials, demanding resignations. Reporters jostled for sound bites. On stage, Delgado tried to calm them. "We are pursuing every lead," a man's voice cut through. "You failed us once. How do we know you won't fail us again?" The crowd erupted. Hannah sat in the back, heart pounding. For them, every unanswered question was another betrayal. And unless they found Whitman soon, the town's fury would turn from grief to something darker. Late that night, Hannah returned to her empty house. She poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and finally let herself exhale. The quiet was suffocating. Her eyes fell on the Polaroid spread across her coffee table. One in particular drew her, the blurry figure in the background, tall, broad, watching. She leaned closer, tracing the outline of his blurred face. For a moment, it felt like he was staring straight back. The phone rang, sharp and sudden. She jumped, nearly knocking the glass from her hand. It was Patel. His voice was urgent. "Detective, you need to come to the station. Now, someone left something for us." Her pulse spiked. "What?" "A package, no return address. Inside, another Polaroid." Hannah gripped the phone tighter. "Of what?" Patel's voice dropped. "Of you, standing outside the mall. Taken last week." The room spun. Hannah's skin went cold. Charles Whitman wasn't just a ghost. He was watching her. The envelope was plain brown, no stamps, no markings. Just slid through the front doors of the station sometime after midnight. Now it lay on the evidence table, sealed inside a plastic sleeve. Hannah stared at it as if it might pulse, her own reflection wavering on the glossy surface. Inside was a single Polaroid. Her. She stood outside the barricaded Ashford Mall, head bowed, arms crossed against the chill. The image was grainy, but the time was unmistakable. Last week. The angle suggested distance. A telephoto lens, perhaps. Whoever had taken it had been watching, hidden, while she worked. Delgado's voice broke the silence. "It's him." Patel nodded grimly. "Whitman's telling us he's still out there." Still watching, Hannah forced herself to breathe evenly, but her stomach knotted. The line between investigator and prey had blurred. Security was tightened immediately. Patrol cars were stationed outside Hannah's home. Cameras were installed at the station. But Hannah felt no safer. At night, she caught herself peering through blinds, convinced someone was out there in the dark. On her kitchen counter, the Polaroid replayed itself in her mind. The way her body was turned, unaware, vulnerable. Whitman hadn't just resurfaced. He had chosen her. The following morning, the FBI arrived. Special Agent Colin Graves strode into the station, his tailored suit and clipped tone radiating authority. "We're taking lead," he announced to the task force. "Serial offender, interstate activity, escalation. It's our jurisdiction now," Delgado bristled. "This is our town. Our case. Your town," Graves said coolly. "But his hunting ground stretches far wider. We've traced barrels to Waco, possibly Oklahoma. If Whitman's mobile, he's federal." The room buzzed with tension. Hannah asked quietly, "Then why send me a photo? Why Ashford again?" Graves studied her for a moment. "Because you're threatening his mythology. He spent decades building this ghost story, and now you're pulling it apart. That makes you dangerous to him, dangerous, or target." That night, Hannah sat in her car overlooking the mall. The barricades gleamed under floodlights, the building's skeleton looming behind them like a hollowed-out beast. She tried to imagine Whitman standing in the shadows, camera raised, breath steady as he framed her in the lens. Did he feel triumph, amusement, or something colder? Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Her blood ran cold. She typed back, hands trembling. "Who is this?" No reply. A minute later, another text arrived. "Check your porch." Heart pounding, she started her car and sped home. 2 patrol cars idled outside her house, officers alert. Hannah ran up the steps, flashlight slicing the dark. There, on the porch, sat a shoebox. Inside was another Polaroid. This time it showed her house, curtains drawn, but the outline of her silhouette visible through the glass. Pinned to the photo was a scrap of notebook paper, yellowed and lined. Written in a child's looping hand. "If you find me, will you keep me safe?" Hannah's vision blurred. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Jessica Ortiz. The notebook from the storage boxes. Whitman still had pieces. He was feeding them back like breadcrumbs. At the emergency meeting, the FBI scanned the evidence. "He's escalating," Graves said. "First trophies, and now contact. He wants attention." Delgado slammed a fist on the table. "He's taunting us while the town tears itself apart. We need to find his base." Patel leaned forward. The shoebox was clean. No prints, but the Polaroid film batch. It's recent. Manufactured last year. That means Whitman isn't just recycling old stock. He's buying film now. Hannah's throat tightened. "And he's still taking pictures." Graves nodded. "Which means he's planning something new. Or someone new." The next days blurred into long hours of combing camera store records, interviewing clerks, scanning surveillance. Each lead fizzled. But on Thursday, a call came from a pawn shop owner in Temple. A man had come in months ago, bought out their entire Polaroid stock in cash. No name, no ID. The owner described him. 60s, gaunt, balding, with a limp. Whitman. The owner hesitated before adding, "He had a kid with him." Teen boy. Quiet. Stood by the door the whole time. The room went silent. Whitman had a companion. That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. She walked her neighborhood in the dark, patrol car lights flickering at the corner. Her mind churned. A boy, a recruit, a hostage, a mirror of Whitman himself, 20 years earlier when he first stalked the mall. She imagined Jessica's handwriting again. "If you find me, will you keep me safe?" The children had been trapped, but maybe one could still be saved. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown text. Ashford Mall. Midnight. Alone. Her breath caught. Against every protocol, every instinct, she felt herself drawn. Because if Whitman was summoning her back to the place it all began, it meant the story wasn't finished. And she was no longer just the detective. She was the quarry. The air was sharp with frost when Hannah pulled her car into the service lane behind the Ashford Mall. Midnight. The world around her lay silent, the town asleep. She had told no one, not Delgado, not Patel, not the FBI. The message had been clear. Alone. If she brought backup, Whitman might vanish back into the shadows for another decade. She killed the engine and sat in the dark, her heartbeat quick and heavy. The mall loomed before her like a carcass, concrete bones and empty windows catching the moonlight. Its silence pressed against her ears until every creak of metal, every whisper of wind felt amplified. She stepped out, flashlight in one hand, service weapon in the other. The crunch of gravel beneath her boots sounded indecently loud. Inside, the mall was colder, the air stale with mold and dust. Her flashlight beam carved through the dark, catching fragments of decay. A tattered poster, a cracked mannequin, a food court chair overturned decades ago. She walked slowly, every step echoing. Her voice carried low. "Whitman." Silence. "You wanted me here." "I'm here." Her light swung across the floor. Something white lay ahead. She approached cautiously, gun raised. A Polaroid, face down. She nudged it with her boot before picking it up. The image showed her car, parked just minutes ago in the service lane. A fresh photograph. Her pulse quickened. He was here. From the mezzanine above, a sound, the squeak of shoe rubber against tile. She spun, light cutting upward. A figure stood in the shadows, tall, broad, face obscured. For an instant, her breath caught. "Whitman," she called, voice steadier than she felt. The figure didn't move. Then a second, smaller figure stepped out beside him. A boy, maybe 15. His posture tense, shoulders hunched. Hannah's gut tightened. The pawn shop clerk had been right. Whitman's voice carried down, gravelly, mocking. "You followed the breadcrumbs, detective." Just like the children did. The boy shifted uneasily at his side. "Who is he?" Hannah demanded. "My shadow," Whitman said. "My witness. Everyone needs an apprentice." The boy's eyes flicked toward her, wide, frightened. Not an apprentice, a hostage. Hannah forced her tone calm. "Let him go, Charles. This ends tonight." Whitman's laugh echoed against the concrete. "You think you end me?" "No, detective. You're just another photograph waiting to be taken." He raised an old Polaroid camera, the flashbulb glinting. "Smile." The bulb fired, blinding her for an instant. Her vision swam. When it cleared, the mezzanine was empty. Hannah ran, boots pounding, flashlight swinging wildly. She climbed the emergency stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering. At the top, her light swept across broken storefronts, corridors stretching like veins. No one. Then, movement. A door slamming shut. She sprinted, the sound of her breath loud in her ears. The door led into an old security office. The room smelled of mildew and old electronics. On the desk lay another Polaroid. Fresh. The chemicals hadn't even dried. It showed her face mid-sprint, mouth open, eyes wide. Whitman was photographing her in real time. A whisper came from the corner. "Help me!" She swung her light. The boy crouched there, trembling. His wrists were bound with zip ties. "Shh," she whispered, moving quickly. She holstered her gun and pulled her knife to cut the ties. "I'm here." "You're safe." But even as she worked, she knew. Whitman wouldn't leave his shadow behind without reason. The trap sprung a second later. The office door slammed shut. A metal bar scraped into place on the other side. Hannah lunged, throwing her weight against it. Solid. Trapped. The boy whimpered. "He said he'd kill me if I screamed." Hannah crouched beside him. "Listen to me. What's your name?" "Eli." "Eli, look at me." His wide eyes lifted to hers. "We're getting out of here. But you have to stay quiet. Stay behind me." "Can you do that?" He nodded shakily. From the hallway came the sound of a Polaroid ejecting from its camera. A mechanical whir, followed by Whitman's voice. "Every hunter needs a gallery." Another flash fired through the narrow window in the door, flooding the room with white light. A fresh photo slipped under the crack. Hannah kneeling by Eli. She picked it up with trembling fingers. The ink was still developing. An hour passed in suffocating silence. Hannah tried the window. Too narrow. The ventilation grate, bolted from the outside. Eli huddled in the corner, whispering fragments of his ordeal. Whitman had found him hitchhiking outside Waco, promised food, shelter. At first it had been kind. Then the photographs began. Hannah's jaw clenched. Whitman wasn't raising an apprentice. He was grooming another victim. At last, footsteps returned. Slow, deliberate. The bar lifted. The door swung open. Whitman filled the frame, camera hanging from his neck, a hunting knife in his hand. His face was lined, hair thin, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, gleaming with amusement. "Detective," he said, voice almost tender. "Now I have you both." Hannah rose, weapon leveled. "Drop it, Charles." He smiled faintly, knife gleaming. "If you shoot me, my shadow runs. If you don't, we finish the story." His eyes flicked to Eli. "Tell her, boy. Tell her how I keep you safe." Eli's voice cracked. He said if I stay, no one can hurt me, that he's the only one who knows what's out there." Hannah's stomach twisted. Whitman had rewritten terror as safety. She steadied her aim. "Eli, he lied. He killed the children in this mall. He'll kill you too." Whitman chuckled. "Children always need bedtime stories. Mine are just more honest." Then, quick as a striking snake, he lunged. The knife flashed. Hannah fired. The shot cracked through the empty mall, echoing down corridors. Whitman staggered, knife clattering to the floor, blood blooming across his shoulder. He didn't fall. He laughed, wheezing. "You think you've won? This building is mine. Every wall, every floorboard. You're just another relic now." He stumbled backward into the hallway, disappearing into the maze of shadows. Hannah dragged Eli to his feet. "Move!" They ran through corridors, the mall a labyrinth of dark echoes. Somewhere behind them, Whitman's laughter followed, thin and rasping, yet triumphant. They burst out through a service door into the night air, Hannah's chest heaving, Eli clutching her hand. Patrol cars screeched into the lot. Delgado, Patel, FBI agents, all converging. Delgado's eyes widened. "Mercer, what the hell?" Hannah didn't answer. She looked back at the mall, its broken windows dark and hollow. Whitman was still inside, wounded but alive, and he wasn't finished. The mall was sealed by dawn. Patrol cars lined the perimeter, floodlights stabbing through the early fog. FBI agents moved like ants, radios hissing with clipped commands. Detective Hannah Mercer stood apart, wrapped in a blanket, her shoulder aching from the recoil of last night's shot. Eli sat nearby, sipping from a styrofoam cup of cocoa, flanked by officers. His eyes were glassy, but he was alive. Delgado joined her, face pale. "You should have told me." "He asked for me," Hannah said, her voice raw. "If I hadn't gone, we'd have nothing. Now we know. He's here." Delgado exhaled, torn between fury and grim respect. "Then let's end this before someone else dies." Inside, the mall had become a hunting ground. Teams swept through in formation, lights slicing corridors. Every echo was suspect, every shadow a threat. Hannah moved with Patel and Graves, the FBI agent. The air was damp, metallic, thick with the smell of mold and old wiring. "Blood trail," Patel murmured, pointing to smeared droplets across the tile. It led them past gutted storefronts, past the carousel frozen in the atrium's center like a dead animal. The droplets grew fainter, then vanished. "He's bleeding," Graves said. "But not enough." He's still mobile. Hannah scanned the walls. Whitman knew this building. He'd built parts of it, poured its bones. If he wanted to vanish, he'd vanish into the concrete itself. At the far end of the atrium, they found another Polaroid taped to a wall. It showed Eli, bound, gagged, terrified. Except the picture was from last night. Hannah's skin prickled. Whitman had carried it with him, left it here like a calling card. "He's taunting us," Graves muttered. "No," Hannah said softly. "He's marking the trail." As if on cue, another Polaroid appeared at the base of an escalator. This one of Hannah herself, kneeling beside Eli in the security office. "He's turning the mall into a gallery," she whispered. And somewhere, he was still watching. Hours stretched. The search teams found traces, cigarette ash, shoe scuffs, another rusted tool. But no Whitman. By evening, frustration mounted. Delgado slammed a fist against the wall. "We've got him cornered, damn it!" Where the hell is he hiding? Hannah studied the floor, mind racing. Whitman's signature was always the same, concrete and concealment. He didn't just kill, he buried. She remembered the Polaroids, the way he staged them like exhibits. A gallery needed walls. "Basement," she murmured. Graves frowned. There is no basement. There wasn't supposed to be, she said. But in the blueprints Whitman signed off on, service tunnels, storm drains, spaces sealed when the mall closed, he'd know them better than anyone. Patel's eyes widened. A hidden level, Delgado barked into his radio. Get me ground-penetrating radar. Now night fell again. The parking lot swarmed with vehicles, generators growling. The radar crew set up, their screens glowing. Within an hour, they found it. Beneath the eastern wing, a hollow space stretching the length of several stores. A sealed chamber. They broke through by morning, jackhammers roaring, concrete splintering. The sound echoed like thunder across Ashford. When the dust cleared, a stairwell yawned open, black, wet, reeking of mildew. Hannah descended first, flashlight steady. Patel followed, then Graves. The chamber below was vast, a cavern of unfinished concrete. Puddles shimmered in the beam. Rusted pipes ran along the walls, and on every surface, Polaroids. Hundreds of them. Faces of children. Ashford kids at birthday parties, soccer games, school dances. Some photos decades old, others yellowing with age. They had been taped in neat rows, transforming the chamber into a grotesque shrine. Patel whispered, "Dear God." Hannah stepped closer, throat tight. In the center wall, a fresh Polaroid hung alone. It showed her walking down these very stairs, flashlight raised. The sound came then, a shuffle of feet behind the wall. Hannah froze. "He's here." Graves drew his weapon. "Come out, Whitman." Silence. Then, from the shadows, his voice, hoarse, mocking. "Detective Mercer, you found my bones." A panel of plywood shifted. Whitman emerged, his shirt blood-stained, his face ghostly pale but eyes burning with manic light. He leaned against the wall for support, Polaroid camera dangling from his neck. "This is my cathedral," he rasped. "Every saint needs one." "Drop the camera, Charles," Hannah ordered. He lifted it instead, lens glinting. "Smile, detective." The flash fired. The shot echoed a heartbeat later. Graves had fired. The Polaroid camera shattered, clattering to the floor. Whitman staggered but didn't fall. Instead, he laughed, a hollow, gurgling sound. "You can't kill me. I'm in every wall, every shadow, every child who walked into this place and never came out." He lunged, knife in hand. Hannah fired once, clean and steady. The impact drove him back against the concrete. He slid down, breath rattling, blood pooling. Still he smiled, lips cracked. "Check the water," he whispered. "You'll never find them all." His eyes glazed, the smile frozen. Charles Whitman, hunter of children, was dead. The chamber fell silent, but for the drip of water. Patel lowered his gun slowly. Graves exhaled, shaking his head. "It's over." But Hannah knew it wasn't. Not really. Whitman's shrine surrounded them. Hundreds of photographs, hundreds of names, and his final words echoed in her skull. "Check the water." The mall had been one grave, the reservoir another. How many more lay hidden? By the time they brought Whitman's body up, the town had gathered behind barricades. News vans beamed the image live. The monster carried out in a black bag, escorted by FBI agents. Some parents wept. Others shouted curses. A few simply stared, hollow-eyed, as though the reality couldn't touch the years of not knowing. Hannah stood apart once more, watching the crowd. She had caught him, ended him. But the triumph felt thin, empty. Because in Ashford, closure was never clean, and the dead still whispered from beneath the concrete. The town square filled like a wound exposed to air. By morning, hundreds of people pressed shoulder to shoulder, waiting for answers. Candles, posters, photographs of missing children lined the courthouse steps. The news anchors spoke in hushed tones, microphones trembling with the chill. Detective Hannah Mercer stood at the edge of the crowd, coat buttoned tight, head bowed against the murmurs. Every face seemed to ask the same question. What now? The monster was gone, but the scars remained. At the police station, boxes multiplied. Evidence, photographs, fragments of Whitman's grotesque archive. The FBI cataloged each Polaroid, each scrap of clothing, each bone fragment. A war room stretched wall to wall with images of children. Agent Graves briefed the task force, voice heavy. Whitman is confirmed dead, but his legacy extends far beyond Ashford. Reservoir dredging has already begun in Waco. We expect more recoveries? No one spoke. The weight of it crushed the air. Hannah forced herself to ask, "And Eli?" "Protective custody," Graves replied. "He's frightened, but he's talking." "He may be the only living witness to Whitman's last years," Patel shook his head slowly. "A boy raised in the hunter's den. That'll leave marks, so would everything." The funerals began within days. Lydia Moore's remains were returned to her family. The service overflowed, townsfolk crowding outside the small chapel, listening through open doors. Her parents clutched one another, hollow-eyed, as the coffin was lowered. Noah Franklin's service followed. His mother collapsed at the graveside, wailing until her voice broke. Hannah stood in the back, her hands trembling. For Jessica Ortiz and Maya Ellis, there were no funerals yet. Their families lit candles instead, photographs framed in flowers. Hope and despair balanced like knives. Rosa Ortiz caught Hannah's arm afterward. "You promised me she wouldn't be forgotten," she whispered fiercely. "Don't let them stop searching." Hannah swallowed hard. "I won't." "I swear." At night, Hannah returned to her apartment, sat in the dark, and listened. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator made her chest tighten. Sometimes she swore she heard the faint whir of a Polaroid camera. She replayed Whitman's final words, "Check the water." She dreamed of rivers choked with concrete, reservoirs heavy with secrets. Every body they found was a question answered, and a new question raised. How many more? The town of Ashford tried to heal. The mall was cordoned off, declared a crime scene indefinitely. There was talk of demolishing it, leveling the place that had become a tomb. But some residents resisted. "It's history," one man argued at a town hall. "It's horror," a woman countered. "Leave it standing," another said, "so we never forget what happened here." The vote stalled, voices clashing, wounds reopened. The building remained, half ruin, half monument, and at its edges, candles kept appearing. Notes, photographs, toys. A vigil that never ended. Eli testified weeks later, trembling under the courthouse lights. His voice was soft, halting as he described nights in the cabin, the rules Whitman imposed, the Polaroids lined on walls like wallpaper. "He said the pictures made us safe," Eli whispered, "that if people saw us, they couldn't take us away." The courtroom shuddered with quiet sobs. Hannah watched from the gallery, fists clenched in her lap. Eli's words were evidence, yes, but they were also proof of survival. Proof that someone had walked out of Whitman's labyrinth alive. Months passed. Ashford slowly shifted, scar tissue forming over old wounds. The protests faded. The news vans left. But the families remained, carrying absence like stone. Patel moved on to another case. Delgado considered retirement. Graves filed his reports and vanished back into federal corridors. But Hannah stayed. She visited Rosa Ortiz weekly, sat at her kitchen table, drank tea neither of them tasted. She walked the riverbanks at dusk, searching, even when search teams had left. She drove past the mall at night, headlights brushing the barricades. The building loomed, silent, but she could almost feel eyes behind its windows. And in her apartment, she kept the last Polaroid Whitman had taken. Her face in the stairwell, flashlight raised. A reminder. A warning. One evening in spring, she found herself at the Ortiz home again, Rosa had left the back door open, the smell of incense drifting out. Inside, the living room was quiet. The old photo of Jessica still sat on the mantel, her smile frozen in time. "She would have been 32 this year," Rosa said softly. "I try to imagine her grown, but all I see is that little girl with the blue backpack." Hannah nodded, throat thick. "We're still looking. Reservoir crews are working every week. We won't stop." Rosa's eyes glistened. "I know, but sometimes I think maybe she's not in the water at all. Maybe she's still out there somewhere." Waiting, Hannah didn't answer. Hope was both a gift and a curse. That night, Hannah stood again at her window, blinds half closed. The street below lay empty, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She lifted the Polaroid from her desk. Her own eyes stared back at her from that grainy image, wide, unguarded. Whitman was gone, but his shadow remained. She whispered into the silence, to no one, to everyone. "I'll keep them safe." The words hung in the air, fragile but fierce. And outside, the city lights flickered like candles in the dark. The demolition was set for June. By then, the barricades had grown heavy with flowers and weather-stained teddy bears. The families gathered one final time, watching as the machines lined up, their arms raised like executioners. The Ashford Mall, once the town's pride, later its wound, stood hollow and silent. Its windows stared blankly back at them, glass long gone, frames jagged as teeth. Rosa Ortiz clutched Hannah Mercer's arm. "When it falls, it'll take them with it." "No," Hannah said softly. "We already carry them. The walls are just walls now." The first swing of the wrecking ball shook the ground. Dust exploded into the sky. The crowd gasped, some cheering, some weeping. The sound was less like destruction than release. A final exhalation from a building that had been forced to hold its secrets too long. But demolition was not the end. Crews combed through rubble, careful, respectful. Amid shattered concrete and rusted rebar, they found more bones. Not many, not enough to name, but fragments that spoke of children lost. The county coroner worked late into the nights, cataloging, testing, matching DNA against the families who had waited decades. Some finally received answers. Others received only silence. And always, the question lingered. How many are still missing? Months later, a memorial was raised where the mall had stood. A simple stone wall, etched with the names of the vanished. Below it, a bronze carousel horse, frozen mid-leap. At the dedication ceremony, the families gathered again, their faces lined by grief and years. Hannah stood among them, hands clasped, watching Rosa trace Jessica's name with trembling fingers. When the mayor spoke, his voice broke. "Ashford will never forget. These children belong to us, to our memory, to our future. This ground is hallowed by their absence." Candles flickered in the twilight. The carousel horse gleamed in bronze, eternal, unbroken. Hannah continued her work. Cases piled high on her desk. Thefts, assaults, the everyday wounds of a town. But the mall case never left. It lived in her drawers, in the folders she refused to box away. Every so often she received calls from other counties. Reservoir dredges uncovering barrels, unfinished buildings hiding sealed chambers. Each discovery traced back, always, to Whitman's reach. Every time she drove out, stood by the water or the concrete, and whispered the same promise: "I'll keep them safe." One evening, nearly a year after Whitman's death, Hannah returned home to find a package on her porch. No postage, no markings. Her chest tightened. She carried it inside, set it on the table, and opened it with slow, careful hands. Inside was a single Polaroid. Not of her, of Jessica Ortiz, smiling, alive, seated on a carousel horse. The photo was crisp, untouched by time, as if taken yesterday. On the back, in faint pencil, 3 words, "She rode once." Hannah's breath caught. The picture was not in the archives, not in Whitman's shrine. This was something new, or something hidden all this time. Her hands trembled. Was it Whitman's final gift, a photograph he never revealed? Or had someone else found it, kept it, and now chosen to return it? She placed the Polaroid on her desk beside the one of herself. 2 ghosts, side by side. The hunter was gone, but the photographs lived on. That night, Hannah dreamed of the carousel turning, its music warped, its horses leaping endlessly into the dark. Children laughed, not screams, but laughter, echoing through the hollow mall. And in the dream, Jessica turned her head and whispered, "Don't forget us." Hannah woke with tears on her face. She rose, poured coffee, and sat by the window. Dawn bled across the horizon, the town stirring awake. Somewhere families carried on, wounds scarred but not healed. She lifted the Polaroid once more, studied Jessica's bright eyes, her fleeting joy. "No," Hannah whispered into the quiet morning. "I won't." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying dust, memory, and something like release. The mall was gone, but its shadows would live forever.